This video is a look at all things Nintendo Switch 2. I'm talking name, release date, launch titles, price, and so much more. We're going to predict everything. I've been around for many console launches and I've picked up a ridiculous wallet-crushing amount of consoles on day one. I've used my prior knowledge along with spending hours looking at every rumour and leak for the Switch 2 to bring you the definitive Switch 2 predictions video. And all the while, I'll be showing you footage of some of my favourite titles on Nintendo Switch that you might want to pick up. Okay, let's get to it. So in the last day or so, Video Game Chronicles, VGC, an excellent gaming website, they have reported heavily on the Switch 2, and they are surmising that the console is going to come out in 2024 and that it's going to be priced around $400. So we want to look into everything that is going on around the Switch, and we're going to use those rumours, speculation, and the writing that we've got from VGC to see what we can come up with and what we think here at Gaming Oddities. The first thing I want to talk about is the actual announcement date and format of that announcement. So as we know for the Switch, we had that kind of Switch event that looked at the first few titles that we've seen, gave us a bit more of an in-depth overview, and I suspect something similar will probably happen for Nintendo Switch 2. I think we're probably likely to get early in 2024 an announcement that new details will be coming on the successor to the Nintendo Switch, and then a date for maybe a month from that date or a few weeks from that date, and then we will find out all about the Switch's successor. In terms of a date for that, I think the actual event will probably be around March 2024. So maybe look for an announcement near the start of March into maybe the end of February, and then we'll get that event coming shortly after, probably within the month. On the initial announcement, we may even get a brief kind of trailer, the same way we did for the Switch, where it will tease certain features, certain games, but the full deep dive will take place in March. After that, likelihood is we're going to get hands-on media events, previews, things like that. Previews maybe done under Nintendo's kind of own very controlled conditions, so that you can give kind of first thoughts and ideas on what we think of the console in the media space. The next big thing to predict, I think, is the actual naming of this console itself. So I think the idea online has been to just refer to this as the Switch 2. A very popular choice has been calling this the Super Switch or the Super Nintendo Switch. I actually really like that one. It obviously gives a brilliant callback to their previous console with the SNES, and the fact that that was kind of iterative on the NES, but everyone knew that it was the next console. I think that's what Nintendo really needs to be careful about, and really needs to make sure that it is known that this isn't just a Switch expansion, this is an actual brand new system. We do not want the same mistake happening that they made with the Wii U. You know, people thought that was an add-on or a peripheral for the Wii. People were just kind of confused in general as to what it was. If you watched the initial trailer, was it a tablet? Was it the actual console and tablet it ended up being? Everyone was a bit confused and not entirely sure, and a lot of that confusion was for actual gamers and people in the games industry and the games media. So God knows what normal everyday people that are maybe just interested in picking up a game console in around Christmas or when their kids asking for a new one, they would have been thoroughly confused, and that's something that the Switch 2 needs to completely avoid. So Switch 2, I think, would be a good name for it. Just simple, straight up, follow that kind of Sony PS1, 2, 3, 4, 5 route, and it makes it completely clear and there's no confusion whatsoever. This is the successor to the Switch, but I do have a real soft spot for Super Nintendo Switch, and I think that's what I would predict that the console will be called, the SNS. Super Nintendo Switch. In terms of other names that don't use the Switch branding, if they are going to do something completely different, I think there's a chance that this could be called the Nintendo Vision. So this is going to come into a prediction later on that I'm going to make when we talk about the actual form factor and stuff like that. But keep in mind, Nintendo Vision. I can see that being something short, snappy. Are you playing the Vision tonight? It could work. And we'll get into why in the prediction when we come to the actual hardware itself. Okay, in terms of the form factor and the controller, we'll start off with the controller. It's always a really important part of a Nintendo system. For many years now, people have been looking out for, okay, what's the controller going to be? We had obviously the NES with the original, the SNES kind of iterated on that and improved it, made it more comfortable. We jumped to something then with the N64, which was completely out of left field, the kind of triple hand grip, really crazy controller that you probably wouldn't have predicted at that time. Then we got what I think is probably one of Nintendo's best, if not the best, in the GameCube controller. So comfortable in the hand, different kind of button layout with that central A button playing a prominent role. The Wii then took things in a completely different direction. It changed the game literally, and I remember seeing that and being absolutely shocked. Wii U then introduced the tablet kind of base controller. Switch, if you're playing it docked with everything clicked in together, I guess it also is a tablet based controller, but the fact that those were interchangeable, that you could take them off, that you could play kind of free open hand gaming with no wires, no kind of even having to have your hands together, you could completely relax on a sofa with them. You could also change that into a controller itself. And then obviously we had the Pro controller as well to go along with that. So what do I think we're going to get out of the Super Nintendo Switch or the Switch 2? Well, I think it's going to be quite similar to the Nintendo Switch that we currently have. So I could see this potentially keeping the naming convention and having Joy-Con 2.0, something like that, or Joy-Con HD, or whatever kind of moniker they want to give it to kind of differentiate it a bit. And I think we could maybe see that the controllers will be backwards compatible so that you can attach Switch Joy-Con to the Switch 2, so that you already have a kind of built up library of controllers ready to go. We've seen that in the Wii U day. Whenever you had a Wii controller or Wiimotes, you could connect them up and still use them. It made it accessible for multiplayer games, and I think Switch 2 could do something kind of similar in that vein. But in terms of the actual Joy-Con themselves, or the Joy-Con 2.0, there are a lot of different improvements that I would like to see, and a lot of different things that I think they could do. So first things first, it's the buttons. This has been rumored for a long time. VGC, in their reporting that I mentioned at the start of the video, they said that the Switch 2 is going to keep its kind of form factor, keep this handheld nature. So that's why I think we are getting Joy-Con or some type of iteration on Joy-Con with this. With the actual buttons themselves, it's been rumored for a long time that these are going to be color-coded buttons, much like the SNES was in Europe or Japan, and I think that further leads to the fact that this may be called the Super Nintendo Switch or the Super Switch, or could we even see it be called the new Nintendo Switch? I know Nintendo have done that in the past, but when you think about the new 3DS, they released the smaller version that had interchangeable faceplates, but that also introduced the colored buttons from SNES. So I think starting off with the buttons, we'll see a similar layout, similar number of buttons to a normal controller that we currently have, but they will be color coded. Getting on to the shoulder buttons, I would really like to see Nintendo switch away, no pun intended, from the digital style buttons and go to a more analog style button on the shoulders, something that does the actual pressure and can gauge how far up or down that the actual trigger is. I think it could be something interesting mechanically that they could then play with in a lot of their games. Also, one of the other aspects that I think is going to come into this console will be taking a leaf out of Sony's book with the PlayStation 5. Switch obviously started off with HD Rumble. That was then kind of brought in with Sony's PlayStation 5 in a far better way. I mean, the DualSense controller, feeling that in the hand for the very first time, it really was a game changer for myself anyway. I really enjoyed my experience with that. So I'd like to see what a new kind of Nintendo version of that is. HD Rumble 2.0. I want to see haptics in the triggers so that they're harder to pull for certain weapons, for certain tasks. I think that's a really cool feature, and it's something that Nintendo could do well. I'd like to see the rumble inside these controllers be expanded upon, make that HD rumble even better feel in the hand. It was cool when Switch came out. I think Sony have now topped that, and I'd like to see Nintendo go above and beyond even what the DualSense has and really incorporate that into the new Joy-Cons. Now, in terms of feel of the controller itself, I have been quite critical of the Joy-Con myself. I think they're really innovative for their time, and they were cool, and it's a brilliant idea making them interchangeable. You can take them on and off. But I do think they are quite small and uncomfortable in the hand, and for the last few years, if I'm sitting down to play any kind of regular lengthy session of Nintendo Switch in handheld mode, I will use the Hori Split Pad Pro. And if you don't know what they are, you can look them up, but they are more kind of substantial in the hand. They feel more like a controller's just been split in two and added either side of your Switch screen. And while I don't think Nintendo will maybe go quite as big as that, I would like to see the Joy-Con molded or expanded slightly, so there's something a little bit more to hold on to so that they are a little bit more comfortable in the hand. Of course, we have rivals like the Rogue Ally now, we have the Steam Deck, we have the like of the Split Pad Pro from Hori, and Nintendo has to be looking at this and thinking, people probably do like that more comfortable feel in the hand. We have the new PlayStation Portal as well. It's very comfortable in the hand. And yes, aesthetically, it maybe takes away from the console. It maybe makes them look slightly bulkier. But I think if any company can do a nice design for it, make it look sleek, even though it's got that bit more of a bulk to it, I think it's Nintendo. On to the actual unit itself. So we've talked about the controllers, we've talked about the name. In terms of the actual unit, we've seen those rumors of it having maybe potentially dual screens or triple screens so that it would fold like a Nintendo DS or 3DS, and there would actually be a screen on the outside. Now that's an interesting idea because I think that could then work really well for playing Wii U games or DS games when the system is maybe connected to the TV. And I think that could be achieved by having a different type of dock as well. The standard dock that you actually slide your Switch into and it sits over by your TV. I'm wondering if that can be replaced by some kind of dongle system, if they can get the latency down so that there's very little latency or no latency at all basically, and it's plugged into the back of the TV as a dongle, and then you can just switch to and from handheld to TV mode. And it means you could keep the entire system in your hand and be looking at the TV screen, and it means you could have that extra screen in front of you, but the system would be closed. You could have it open. That would then mean you would have 3 screens. You could look at the 2 that are in front of you and the one that's on the TV as well. I think it's something that Nintendo could really play around with and do some interesting things, especially for their own first-party games. I think for third-party stuff, it's more likely to be a gimmick unless it's ports of 3DS or DS games. But I do like the idea of at least having the dual screen, if not the 3-screen idea where it kind of can swivel around and do different things. I do like the idea of having a dual screen handheld again. My favourite set of handhelds were the 3DS. I loved the DS line before that as well. And not only does it make it easy to port those games and titles or put them on the kind of Nintendo's online service, it just means we have different experiences and different ways to play certain games. So I can imagine something like Tears of the Kingdom getting a remastered version where it's in a better resolution, better frame rate, and this time your top screen contains just your gameplay, and everything else, all your kind of icons and your hearts and everything are all contained on the bottom screen. The menu system, it makes it far more intuitive and easy to switch between things instead of having to go in and out of menus. You could have that on a separate touchscreen at the bottom. So I would really like to see the dual screen setup for the Nintendo Switch too. Whether whether or not we get the dual screen setup, there is another kind of debate to be had around whether this is going to be an LCD screen or an OLED screen. And unfortunately, I'm sorry to tell you, but I think this is going to be an LCD screen. I think OLED adds very much to the cost of a screen, and Nintendo have been known for many years now to try and keep the costs down, use maybe last generation technology or parts or things that they can get a good deal on, and they come up with something that all together as the overall package with their software and maybe a few new unique ideas with the hardware, they come up with something that makes it work for that price point and makes it attractive. And I don't think they need the glitz and glam of an OLED screen to do that. I think for the hardcore or for anyone that's actually upgraded to a Switch OLED, this is going to be really disappointing. I find it really difficult to go back to my original Switch or the Switch Lite after having the OLED. It doesn't give any resolution boost, it doesn't give any frame rate boost, but those games are so much more enjoyable playing them on that beautiful OLED screen. And to have to move on to the next gen console and take a step backwards in screen quality is going to be pretty disappointing, but I do think that's the route that Nintendo will go. And the other debate with the screen, the final prediction in around that will be whether the resolution is bumped up. So as we know on the Nintendo Switch currently, we have a 720p image. With the screen being smaller, you can kind of get away with 720p, but I think I would like to see this happen, and I think it will happen. I think we'll see that bump up to 1080p. That's something that's not going to add significantly to the cost per unit, but the difference will be noticeable, and I think the Switch 2, I'm predicting maybe have in around an 8-inch screen. It means it's going to be able to be differentiated from the current Switch models, and without the OLED, if they can say, look, it's got a better resolution, it's also X amount bigger, it's something that can maybe make the OLED converts like myself kind of forgive them and say, okay, look, it's not OLED, but it is a little bit bigger, we do have the bump up to 1080p, so it's going to be nice and clean looking. I don't think for a moment we're going to get 4K. I think there could be a chance that we get upscaling that can maybe touch towards 1440p or 4K on your TV. Probably more likely to be 1440p, but in terms of the actual handheld experience, I think the maximum we're going to get, and I think what we will get, is a 1080p screen. Okay, so earlier on in the video, one of my naming predictions was that the console itself could be called the Switch Vision or the Nintendo Vision, and now that we're talking about the actual hardware, I'm going to give my reasons as to why I think that could be true. Now, a few months ago, there was a rumour floating around on the internet that the Nintendo Switch 2 would actually contain a camera or two cameras. And I thought about, okay, well, what's the reason that you would have a camera in here? What's something unique or different? Or looking into Nintendo's past, what's something that they've done before that they can iterate on and change? They've done that many times throughout the years, and we see old ideas coming back through. And I'm wondering if we could see something like the augmented reality from the 3DS make a return on the Switch 2. And that's why I'm thinking the name could be Switch Vision or Nintendo Vision. And when we're talking about the hardware, I do think that there is a possibility that this could have a front and rear facing camera, or obviously for augmented reality, at least having the rear facing camera. We've seen the Meta Quest 3 come out recently. It's channeling into a lot of augmented reality kind of stuff, bringing the game to your real world scenario. And yes, that's a VR headset, but it's not something that you necessarily need the headset for. You could be looking down at your screen and things could be changing in the real world around you whilst you point the camera. We've seen them do it with good effect on the Nintendo 3DS. But obviously, many years later, higher graphical quality and power and resolution, I think they could come up with something really compelling. I would love to see maybe a more fully fledged Mario platformer in augmented reality. And this is just complete speculation on my part. I don't have any sources that are saying this is true, so bear that in mind. And if you're interested in leaving something in the comments about your thoughts on whether they will go down the augmented reality route, please put them in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to think on that. But just those rumors saying that it'll have a camera, I kind of think there's no reason to have the camera other than if you're going to play with augmented reality or VR of some description. I don't think they're going to give us a console that's powerful enough or a screen that has the resolution that's capable enough of playing VR. We've seen with the Labo VR, it's really very basic, it's not very good, and I don't think Nintendo are going to go that route. They could, but I think they're more likely to go down the path of augmented reality. As I say, the Meta Quest 3, Apple's new headset as well, seems to be playing around a lot with augmented reality for your applications and your work life. Nintendo could definitely do something in that space, and as I say, it's maybe an additional factor that we could get, so you get like a brand new 2D or 3D Mario game, and then it'll have a section where, look, you can play this part in augmented reality, or you can have a little augmented reality experience where you go out into the menu, choose a different part of the game, and it'll be treated kind of like the Labo VR, but only something a bit more in-depth, a bit more quality. Like I said before, we've seen Nintendo take old ideas, the like of the Virtual Boy with 3D. We then eventually seen that turn into 3DS down the line somewhere. We've seen the dual screens on the Game & Watch eventually turn into the DS and 3DS line of consoles. So there could be a chance that the augmented reality from 3DS comes back and we see this in the console. That's why I came up with the name Nintendo Vision, and I think if the system does have a camera, I would like to see them have another stab at augmented reality gaming. So away from the console itself and talking more about the release, it's time to look at the actual release date for this thing. There are wild rumors and speculation running around all last year that this could be coming as early as the start of 24. That's obviously off the table now. I think the general consensus is that this will probably come out nearer the end of 2024 at this point, or it may even sneak into 2025 and we'll have something like a March launch date the way we had for the Switch. I'd really like this console to hit this year. I think there's been a lot of build up, there's a lot of whispering, rumors and chat going on. I'd like Nintendo to be able to keep as much of it secret and then hit us with it and us to be entertained and enjoy it, rather than having the potential of things leaking out and coming to us. It's fun to have this speculation, but if they push that too far, there is a chance that things will start to leak and they'll ruin the experience a little bit. As well as that, it does make sense to have this launch obviously in around the holiday period, and that's why my prediction would be, I think as a kind of slightly out there prediction or a secondary prediction, it could be in September, but if I'm going to pick an actual definitive date, I think we're looking at the 11th of October 2024. First of all, I think that's a really nice date for launching a product. If you're looking at the American convention of doing the date, it would be 10/11/24. Really nice for marketing. But I also think just from a business standpoint, that gives them the chance to get through that initial run. If the pre-orders are as high as we expect them to be and the Nintendo Switch is flying off the shelves, it could allow them to have a bit of a restock, get inventory in, get that initial buzz out there in the first week or so of the console, and have extra stock ready to go for Black Friday in the US, obviously a massive shopping time in around Thanksgiving, and keep stocking it as much as they can up until Christmas, because this is going to be the must-have gift obviously for the next Christmas season for gamers. I think people are going to completely eat this up. We've seen the last 5 or so years that technology is becoming kind of the must-have thing, and it's really starting to get hard to get certain items. Even looking at something like the PS Portal, we've seen it with the Playdate, with the Steam Deck, we've seen it with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S, and I have no doubt that we're going to see it for the Nintendo Switch 2 or Super Switch or whatever it's going to be called. I think these things are going to be hard to get, so I would like to see it coming out a little bit earlier in the year so that we have a chance of getting some restocks, or it gives people a chance to try and get their hands on a copy before Christmas. I would hate to see a kid being disappointed on Christmas Day not being able to get their Nintendo Switch 2. And that leads us on to price. So I'll be completely honest, I think my initial prediction for this that I had written down was $349.99 and in around £300 in the UK, maybe 320, something in around there. But the VGC report that's came out recently has obviously stated that they are thinking this is going to be a $400 console. And the more I've thought about it, the more I think that is probably a price point that Nintendo can get away with. Yes, it's $100 up on what the original Switch was, but everyone knows what the economy has been through, that inflation is through the roof. People know that the chipsets and things that are used to make these technologies, there was a shortage on them. It's something that's still lingering on in the background. Production costs and everything and the staffing of everything will have all gone up the way. And we're obviously going to be getting something that's a bit better technology, obviously, than the Switch. So that's going to lead to extra costs. I would love to see this come in at $349.99, but after the VGC report, I do think that yes, we could get this coming in at $400. So yeah, I'll agree with them and make my prediction for that $400 or $399.99. And in the United Kingdom, I think we'll be looking at £379.99. So it's basically time to get saving now. If we think this is going to be coming out in around the holiday season of this year, we've got a good bit of time to put some money aside and save up those pennies to get your Nintendo Switch 2, because it looks like it's going to be around $400. So is there a chance that this console will have multiple SKUs? I've heard people kind of discuss that idea, and it's something that we've seen Nintendo do briefly in the past. We had the Wii U where you had the white version and then the black version. With the Switch, we've seen them do the two different color options for the start. So you had the grey Joy-Con or you had the red and blue Joy-Con. And I think that's probably something we're more likely to see. I think we'll see the bright colored kind of Joy-Con 2.0 version, and we'll see a more kind of adult, maybe black, sleeker, or silver, grey, something like that that's a bit more sleeker. And I do think that's something that we could see again for Switch 2. In terms of the actual hardware itself, are we going to see two SKUs? Well, I think for that we need to talk about the screen and the memory. We've obviously discussed the screen. I don't think there's going to be an OLED option for this, but that is a path that I could see there being a divergence where there's a cheaper model and a more expensive for the OLED. Now, would I personally want that? Yes, I would, because I have become accustomed to the OLED screen, and I do think it's something that I would pay the extra for. But I think that's something they'll maybe have down the line for a Pro model or an XL model somewhere along the way. So I don't see there being a SKU on the screen. The only other thing I can see is storage. So we've seen Microsoft do this with their digital-only version. We've seen PlayStation do it with the digital-only version. And then there's obviously the version that takes physical media. Is this something that we're going to see the Switch do? And will there be a difference in the actual storage capacity of each model? Now, the Nintendo Switch had a ridiculously low amount of storage. It had 32 gigabytes, I think, and then I think the OLED had a 64 gigabyte. I think we'll see that bumped up relatively significantly. I think the lowest this will come in with will be 128 gigabytes. Reason being, these are obviously going to be higher, more bigger concept games, which means the file sizes will be larger. If they do want to keep going down the route where they're getting support from third parties, you know third parties are going to want to port over more recent games and experiences, which means bigger file sizes. So I think 128 gigabyte is probably the lowest I would like to see on the system. Higher would be better. I think they're going to continue with having the expanded storage in the form of micro USB. And I think there is the potential that we could get a storage difference in two different versions of the Switch, especially if they are going to do an all digital model. If they're going to do all digital, I think we could see 256 gigabytes in that version, and maybe the physical media version actually have less, or it could have the same amount, but obviously not have the ability to play the physical games. I'm a massive physical collector, as you know from looking at the channel, so I'll definitely be paying the extra to pick up a copy that can play physical games, but Nintendo may follow suit for Sony, and Microsoft and go that direction. And talking about physical media, I want to discuss just the actual form factor of the physical carts themselves. I think it'll be quite similar to Switch. I think Nintendo's got into a groove of having their games on cartridge. They're snappy, they run fast, but there is one improvement I would like to see, and that's the minimum cart size. We've seen a lot of companies cheap out and get the cheapest version of the Nintendo Switch cart that they offer, and it means you can fit hardly any of the game on, or if it's a trilogy, you can maybe fit the first game of the series and then get a download code for the next in the series, or etc. I want to see that done away with. I want the lowest capacity of Switch card to be big enough that it can fit the full games and experiences on these cartridges, even if that means that the form factor is going to have to stay the same or even get slightly larger. I would be 100% fine with it. We all know the Switch cartridges are absolutely tiny, and yes, I do predict that if you lick your Switch 2 cart, it's probably going to be similar and taste like absolute crap, just like the Switch one. So, new features with the console. We've discussed already my thought that they may be doing an AR component in the Switch 2, but there's a couple of other things from the Switch that I would really like to see change. One of them is going to be an obvious one for any fans of the Switch. You've got your black theme, you've got your white theme, and that is it. We want to see custom themes, custom backgrounds. Please bring back the like of the themes from the 3DS. You can have such cool ones. Nintendo has so many characters, so many different songs and themes that they could put on these. But even if they don't do that and we're going basic, you need to be able to change the background to something. On the Switch's online service currently, you can buy different parts and customize your logo picture. I'd like to see them incorporate backgrounds for your Nintendo Switch home screen within that as well. It's an easy win for them that would make fans really happy. It's something that they can throw into maybe special editions or throw into a different version of a game. You know, it includes a code and then you'll get a brand new home screen for your Switch. Stick that as a sticker on the box, another little selling tool that's not going to cost them much money. They could charge for the themes individually and people will still be happy to buy them all, but I think my ideal would be that those are incorporated into Switch's Nintendo Online service. And as we're talking about Nintendo's online service, that's another feature that I think will get an update and will get bolstered during the Switch 2's launch. I think we're going to get more consoles added onto that. If we have a dual screen handheld, obviously DS, potential of even 3DS games, but I think this is it. This is the time. I think we're going to get GameCube games. And I will be praying every single day until the launch of Switch 2 that that's going to be the case. GameCube games would be awesome on the Nintendo's online service, and I think it's about time. Some of those games are locked on there and are inaccessible unless you go out and now spend ridiculous money on them, and I think, again, it's an easy win for Nintendo to get people excited about the Switch 2 and to get people signing up to their online service. I think it's an easy win, something that they can really do to please the fans, but we all know Nintendo, so chances are they probably won't do it. In terms of the console being backwards compatible, I think it will be. Nintendo's online system now seems to be kind of unified, so I think all your digital purchases that you've made on the Nintendo Switch should be there day one on the Switch 2, even though Nintendo is massively backwards and took years to get to this kind of point. I do think it would be unacceptable if they launched the Switch 2 and say you have to start buying everything all over again, and the fact that they have their online system now where you can play the likes of Super Mario Brothers without having to keep purchasing the same game over and over again for $4.99 every single generation, I think is a great thing. So I do think the Switch 2 will be backwards compatible with the Nintendo Switch, at least digitally, but I do think the cartridges will work as well. And the final thing we've talked about a lot, if you've got this far in the video, please hit the like button, comment below, get a bit of a discussion going with other fans or with myself. I'll try to read and write back to as many of the comments as I can. and I would love to hear your Switch 2 predictions. I really, really would. It's such an exciting time for gamers. Can't believe we've got a new piece of Nintendo hardware, more than likely coming this year, so I would love to get the discussion going on that. But the final thing to look at is probably the most important thing, and that is the games. So let's talk about launch games and then launch window games, or maybe the first year and plan for those titles. I think it's all set up for Switch 2 to have a fantastic launch. I think the consensus is that we're going to get a brand new 3D Mario, and I think I would fall in that category as well of saying that that's definitely going to happen. I personally think it'll be something completely brand new, but there is the potential this could be a Super Mario Odyssey 2, it could be a Galaxy 3, we never know, but I think this is going to be its own brand new thing. I think it's going to be in the style of more what Bowser's Fury was. It's going to be a proper open world, one gigantic map Mario. And if that comes out at launch, if it reviews well and it's looking promising, I think that could be an absolute killer game to have on day one. Another option, and I think this would be my prediction for launch, would be Metroid Prime 4. This game's been cooking for a long time now, and although the hardcore Nintendo fans love Metroid, I don't think it's one of their high selling series. So I think this could be one to get out at the start of the Switch 2's lifespan. Reason being, I think it can be a cross-gen title. I think they really have to bring that out on Switch after promising it for so long, so I think the launch date would be perfect. Have it for both consoles. The Switch 2 version runs and looks a bit better, maybe has a couple of extra features, but everyone that still has the Nintendo Switch, maybe doesn't have the funds for the new console, can still play along on their original Switch. I think it's about time for this one. I think because the series doesn't sell super well, it's a nice one to get out there at the start. There's obviously going to be a low install base, but everyone that picks up the Switch 2 is going to want the first party Nintendo games. So the likelihood is you'll pick up a bundle with the 3D Mario and you'll pick up a bundle with Metroid, or add it on as an additional purchase. It'll help the sales be respectable. We've had Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime remastered on the Switch. Both of those have sold better than I think they probably would have a few years ago. So I think it's time for Metroid Prime 4. You have the cartoony, colourful style of a 3D Mario game. Then you'll have the darker, edgier, more adult sci-fi look of Metroid Prime 4. I think the two games go together really well. They cover a wide, broad type of gamers, slightly more adult, slightly kid-friendly. I think it's perfect. The other Nintendo titles that I want to talk about, I don't think will actually come at launch, but I do think they will come in that launch period, within the kind of first year of the console. So we're talking Mario Kart X. I believe Nintendo are classing the mobile Mario Kart game as Mario Kart 9. I don't really agree with that, but it is Nintendo, so I could see that being the case officially, and then coming out with Mario Kart X. I think this Mario Kart game will lean more on a kind of gimmick. I think I could see this going back to maybe the like of Double Dash and having your two racers in the one kart. I don't think it's going to be able to compete with Mario Kart 8 in terms of the number of stages or anything, initially anyway. So I think the two things they can do with this, go back to the Double Dash days and have it that there's two people on the one kart, and I think they can maybe expand this out so it's more Nintendo Kart rather than Mario Kart. We've seen Link be added, we've seen Inklings from Splatoon. I'd like to see that expand a lot more. I'd like to see Kirby cars, Ganondorf cars, Fire Emblem characters, Samus, F-Zero characters. Why not? Just bring everybody in, have them all in Mario Kart, make it like Smash Bros. Ultimate, but for Mario Kart. I think we'll probably get that discussed during the actual announcement of the Switch 2, but I don't think it'll be for launch. I think it'll be just after launch, or maybe into the kind of springtime if this is launching holiday 24. Splatoon 4, I think, is another given. It's something that has really exploded for Nintendo. It's become a bit of a phenomenon. In Japan, it's absolutely massive. So again, I think it's something that could be talked about during the actual launch of the Switch 2, itself. It can be shown off. That and Mario Kart would make for a great example of how multiplayer and stuff's going to work on this system, but I think it'll be teased for down the line. Maybe within that first kind of launch year as well. That might be the big game the next Christmas afterwards, but I don't think it will come at launch. But I do think we'll see Mario Kart, we'll see Metroid, we'll see Mario 3D, and we'll see a new Splatoon title all being shown off and all coming within the first year of the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, what about Zelda? With Tears of the Kingdom coming out recently, it's obviously going to be a long time before we see a 3D Zelda game. I'm wondering, could they cook up something that's maybe a top-down or 2D style Zelda game? But I'd say the likelihood is more that we will get the remasters of previous games. I think Ocarina of Time is a candidate to get some kind of 1440p or 4K, an extremely revamped version of that. The 3DS gave us the bones of an upgrade for that, and it was very successful, but it would be nice to see that pushed to the nth degree and bring Ocarina of Time up to kind of the graphics of the like of Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. Not the same art style, but just the graphical capability and the power of the system. I think Ocarina of Time deserves to be given another remaster. Other than that, we've obviously got the low-hanging fruit of Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD. Again, that's something I could see maybe come out the tail end of the Switch's life cycle, just to keep it ticking over, but it could again be a cross-gen platform where you maybe get extra features or it just runs a little bit better on the Switch too. So I think it's a good bet that we'll see something getting shown off for the Zelda franchise, but it won't be a brand new 3D Zelda game. It's more likely to be a remaster or a kind of smaller top-down experience, and I don't think it'll be at launch either, but it may be within that kind of first year of titles. In terms of third-party support, I do think this one's going to get heavily supported with third-party support. Things have changed drastically for Nintendo since the Wii U days. Switch came out and some of the companies were probably rightfully skeptical as to whether this would actually work and take off after the disaster of the Wii U, but I do think we're going to get heavy support at the start from these third parties. I can see EA support with their sports titles. Don't be surprised if this launches and there's the brand new FIFA game from that year. I think there will be indie experiences. Capcom and Ubisoft, they normally support the launches of Nintendo systems. I think we'll see some indie games breaking through as launch window games and obviously filling out the gaps in that first year calendar. But the big one I think we will see is Final Fantasy. And I can see once an exclusivity window runs out on Final Fantasy 16, if the Switch 2 is as powerful as reports suggest, I think it could maybe run a half-decent handheld version of that game. And then we also had reports that the Switch 2 was running a 4K version of Breath of the Wild and the Matrix demo that appeared on the PlayStation 5. If it can run those, I think there's a chance that we get Final Fantasy VII, the remake, the first part, and the second part that's upcoming on the PlayStation, announced for the Nintendo Switch. And I think that would be a massive statement and a really big deal, so I could see them being shown off at the launch event. Look, this has been an absolutely mammoth episode. It's basically a full podcast just discussing Switch 2 and all the things I think could potentially happen. We've talked about the rumours, the leaks, the reports. We've gone over the entire system, from the hardware itself to the games, the pricing, the release date. Any of those things that we've discussed, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. I'd really love to hear what you have to say, and I appreciate you all very much for listening. I'll see you guys in the next one.